Russia just crossed the line. In one of its latest drone attacks, the Kremlin struck a US factory, a civilian factory with no connection to Ukraine's defense or the military, leaving numerous innocent people wounded. Americans are outraged, and the nation's president, Donald Trump, has made a major statement in the aftermath of the attack, implying that Ukraine may soon have the power to hit back against Russia like never before, potentially via long-range missile strikes. Here's a full breakdown of what happened and what it may mean for the future of the Ukraine-Russia war. In the early hours of Thursday, August 21, Russia once more launched one of its massive drone and missile attacks on targets across Ukraine. In total, the attack was said to include over 570 drones and approximately 40 missiles. While Ukraine was able to take out a large percentage of the enemy's weapons, thanks to its domestic and ally-supplied air defense systems, some of them managed to strike their targets, causing explosions, fires and casualties, as shown in multiple images from scenes across the nation. Two of the missiles struck an American electronics factory situated in the remote city of Mukachevo, which is located in far western Ukraine, quite close to the country's borders with European Union and NATO nations Hungary, Slovakia, Poland and Romania. Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrei Sybiha, was one of the first to report the news on X, writing, "Contrary to all efforts to end the war, Russia undertook a massive combined airstrike on Ukraine overnight. Hundreds of drones, hypersonic, ballistic and cruise missiles on civilian and energy infrastructure. One of the missiles struck a major American electronics manufacturer in our westernmost region, leading to serious damage and casualties. A fully civilian facility that has nothing to do with defense or the military." This is not the first Russian attack on American businesses in Ukraine, after strikes on Boeing offices in Kyiv earlier this year and other attacks. No military logic or necessity, just terror against people, businesses and normal life in our country. This is why efforts to force Russia to end the war are so critical, and we reiterate Ukraine's willingness to make every effort to bring peace closer. The meetings of leaders in a bilateral Ukraine-Russia and trilateral Ukraine-US-Russia formats are crucial to enable diplomacy. Equally important is the work to provide Ukraine with robust security guarantees from partners, including the United States and European allies. Overnight strikes also demonstrate the urgency of strengthening Ukraine's air defense with additional systems and interceptors. As Sybiha notes, Russia's weapons have hit US-linked targets in the past, like back in June of this year, when Russia launched hundreds of drones and 7 missiles towards Kyiv, damaging a Boeing office in the process. However, this attack feels much larger and more significant, because no Boeing staff were hurt in June, but multiple workers were wounded at the factory at Mukachevo, which is owned and operated by the American manufacturing company Flex Limited. One of the largest companies of its kind in the world, Flex was founded in the US, is listed on NASDAQ and has headquarters in both Austin, Texas and Singapore. The company has more than 100 offices and factories worldwide and employs more than 148,000 people. While Flex as a company has some history of producing components for aerospace and defense, among other fields like health, housing, energy and communication, the Mukachevo plant has absolutely zero military connections. It's been operating for over 13 years and extends across more than 590,000 square feet, specializing in components for the likes of coffee machines, printer cartridges and other everyday items. This was confirmed by Flex itself, which issued a statement shortly after news of the attack broke. On the morning of August 21, 2025, our facility in Mukachevo, Ukraine was damaged during a missile strike. Our emergency protocols were executed to ensure the full evacuation of the site. A few employees and contractors were injured during the strike and remain in the hospital. Flex is providing full support to them and their families, and we're engaging with our relevant US government officials and agencies. We've activated our business continuity plan to ensure ongoing operations and are currently assessing the extent of damage to our facility. Our Mukachevo facility is dedicated to consumer and lifestyle products and has no role, past or present, in military or defense production. While the incident is of extreme significance to our Flex teammates, the facility represents approximately 1% of Flex's revenue. The facility also employs over 2,600 people, and around 600 of its workers were on the job at around 4:30 in the morning when the Russian Kalibr cruise missiles hit their workplace. Fortunately, air raid sirens had rang out in the preceding moment, giving the majority of the workers the chance to take cover in secure areas or flee the premises. While most made it out unscathed, the factory itself suffered serious damage. Miroslav Beletsky, governor of the Transcarpia region, revealed that around 1/3 of the plant burnt down as a result of the attack. Ukraine's president Vladimir Zelenskyy quickly took to Telegram to condemn Russia's actions, writing, "Tonight, the Russian army set one of its crazy anti-records. They hit civilian infrastructure enterprises, residential buildings, and our people. They fired several cruise missiles at an American enterprise in Transcarpia. It was an ordinary civilian enterprise, an American investment. They produce such familiar household items as coffee machines, and this is also a target for the Russians. Very revealing. Now the fire is still being extinguished at the enterprise. As of now, 15 people are known to have been injured in this strike. All of them have been provided with the necessary assistance. Rescuers are also working in many other regions, from Zaporizhia to Volyn. In total, 574 attack drones and 40 missiles were used against Ukraine overnight. A significant part was shot down, unfortunately not all of them. And the Russians have delivered this blow as if nothing is changing at all, as if there is no effort from the world to stop this war. A response is needed to this. There is still no signal from Moscow that they're really going to engage in meaningful negotiations and end this war. Pressure is needed. Strong sanctions, strong tariffs. Thank you to everyone who is helping. There are two particularly unusual aspects to this attack. First is the location. As stated, the Flex plant is situated in far western Ukraine, hundreds of miles from the front lines. While it's not unheard of for Russia to strike targets in this region, it's incredibly rare. Indeed, open source intelligence data shows that there have been a mere handful of attacks in the Transcarpia region since the war began, making it one of the most relatively safe places in all of Ukraine over the last few years. The main reason for this is likely the fact that the region has borders with no less than 4 NATO nations. While Russia may have plans to launch an attack on NATO in the future, it has most likely wanted to minimize the risk of any of its drones or missiles accidentally missing their targets and ending up passing the borders, dealing damage or causing casualties in a country like Romania or Hungary. So why now? Why would the Kremlin suddenly order an attack on a region that's so far from the front lines, has no notable buildup of Ukrainian military personnel, and is so close to NATO borders too? Well, that leads on to the second unusual element of this strike, the timing. The attack comes mere days after Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, met with President Trump to discuss a possible ceasefire or peace agreement. At the time, Trump and other officials appeared optimistic, believing that Putin was prepared to make concessions and that a deal might finally be reached to bring the conflict to a close. While nobody expected Russia to stop attacking Ukraine in the meantime, the Kremlin could have made the decision to ease off on some of its long-range deep strikes as a sign that it was willing to work for peace. Instead, it's done the opposite, launching a massive attack on targets deep into Ukraine, and even going one step further by specifically targeting an American enterprise on Ukrainian soil. While Russia has issued no explanation for its attack on the Flex factory, the timing of the strike almost seems like a provocation, as though the Kremlin wants to show it can do whatever it wants, regardless of international pressure. Some officials have even said that Putin is attempting to humiliate and undermine the US, as noted by Andy Hunder, president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine, who wrote on X, "Overnight, Russian missiles attacked one of the largest American investments in Ukraine, Flex, an active member of the American Chamber of Commerce. Russia continues to destroy and humiliate US businesses in Ukraine, targeting companies that invest in trade on the US stock market. Russia is not only destroying Ukraine, it's undermining US leadership, values, and US business. Russia is not seeking peace, it's attacking American interests and values. We're calling on President Donald Trump to stand with American business in Ukraine, stand with the values that built America, and show Putin that the United States protect its own." Luckily, no employees were killed in the missile strike due to the company observing stringent safety measures. Elsewhere across social media, countless Americans have expressed their shock and outrage at the latest attack, with many calling on the country's leader, President Trump, to take action. And it appears that Trump has heard the calls and may be ready to shift his stance on the conflict in quite a dramatic way. Taking to Truth Social, Trump's own social media platform, the 47th president wrote a cryptic yet revealing post. It's very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense but is not allowed to play offense. There is no chance of winning. It's like that with Ukraine and Russia. Crooked and grossly incompetent Joe Biden will not let Ukraine fight back, only defend. How did that work out? Regardless, this is a war that would never have happened if I were president. Zero chance. Interesting times ahead. President DJT. Now, many observers have interpreted this post as one of Trump's most pro-Ukraine statements so far, as he explicitly criticizes the previous administration for preventing Kyiv from being able to strike back at Russia. This is a clear reference to the fact that former President Joe Biden initially prohibited Ukraine from using ally-supplied weapons like long-range ATACMS missiles against targets on Russian soil. This led to widespread frustration at the time as Ukraine suffered the damage, destruction and casualties of Russian missiles and drones, but didn't have permission to launch counterattacks with the powerful US-made missiles in its arsenal. Biden eventually lifted the ban, and Kyiv has since used ATACMS and other long-range ally-supplied missiles like Scalp-EG, the French variant of the UK Storm Shadow, to hit high-value targets in Russia. However, if it had been given permission to use those weapons earlier, it could be in a significantly stronger position today. It can't be known exactly how the war might have turned out if the initial deep strike bans had been lifted sooner. But the fact that Trump is even suggesting that Ukraine should have the right to play offense, as he puts it, and strike back against Russia is a big deal. The three-word conclusion of Trump's post, "Interesting times ahead," could also suggest that the situation is about to take a major turn. The president has not specifically stated exactly what powers or weapons he might grant to Ukraine, but multiple media outlets and experts have weighed in with their views that Trump is possibly laying the groundwork for more long-range strikes from Ukraine into Russia. Such attacks could prove game-changing for the next phase of the war, as Ukraine has proven time and time again that it's adept at identifying the most valuable Russian targets and taking them out with ruthless precision when it has the tools and permission to do so. It has, on numerous occasions, launched seismic strikes on Russian military locations and important infrastructure, including the likes of command posts, ammunition storage facilities, fuel depots, oil refineries, airfields, and so on. Each time one of these targets takes a hit, Russia feels the full effects, as its war machine weakens, its economy suffers, and its invasion plans are delayed and disrupted over and over again. But Ukraine has had to be cautious in its counterattacks, because it doesn't have the same gargantuan military budget that Russia has, nor does it have an endless supply of long-range missiles and the systems needed to fire them. It's worked hard to improve its domestic missile programs, like the Neptune missiles, while also relying heavily on key allies like the US and UK to deliver additional rockets, such as the aforementioned ATACMS, Storm Shadows, and French Scalp-EG. And when it has missiles to use, Ukraine doesn't wastefully fire them into Russia at random targets. It aims to extract as much value out of each one as it possibly can, doing everything in its power to increase the odds of its strikes being successful. It wants to deal as much damage and weaken the Kremlin as much as possible with every single missile. If Trump were, for example, to send more weapons to Ukraine, the country could plan more attacks on the likes of oil pipelines, drone production plants, and other important cogs in the Russian military machine. Alternatively, Trump could work with NATO allies to deliver even more deadly long-range missiles to the Ukrainian armed forces, perhaps opening up the possibility of strikes on targets that are hundreds or even thousands of miles behind the front lines, forcing Russia into the same state of fear and panic that grips Ukraine, never knowing where the next strike might land. In either case, as the president himself states, there are sure to be interesting times ahead in the days and weeks to come as the conflict continues to evolve, and a lot will depend on how the US responds to this latest provocation. It also remains to be seen if Putin is truly willing to meet with Zelenskyy at some point in the near future to thrash out the details of a peace deal. In the wake of the August 15 meeting between Putin and Trump in Alaska, both leaders emerged seemingly optimistic, with Trump holding off on plans to impose additional sanctions on Moscow and calling the talks highly productive. Trump also stated that he and Putin had discussed security guarantees for Kyiv as part of a future deal, which could pave the way to peace at last. Unfortunately, since then, Kremlin officials have downplayed the prospect of peace talks, suggesting that there is still some way to go before Russia will be willing to order its troops to stand down. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that any talk of security guarantees must involve Moscow. I'm sure that in the West and above all in the United States, they understand perfectly well that seriously discussing security issues without the Russian Federation is a utopia. It's a road to nowhere. He went on to add, providing Ukraine with security guarantees through foreign military intervention is completely unacceptable. Ukraine is clearly demonstrating that it's not interested in a sustainable and long-term resolution of the conflict. Lavrov has also said that Putin could meet with Zelenskyy eventually, but that such a meeting is unlikely to be imminent, saying, Putin is ready to meet with Zelenskyy only if all issues requiring discussion at the highest level are thoroughly worked out. It's all part of the Kremlin playbook, and this exact same scenario played out earlier in the year during the peace talks in Turkey. Back then too, many world leaders seemed hopeful that a peace agreement might be reached, and Putin made several encouraging statements and even spoke of meeting with Zelenskyy in person to talk terms. But in the end, peace was just as far off as it had ever been, as Kremlin officials downplayed and delayed any meaningful marks of progress. And in the meantime, Russia launched some of its deadliest ever attacks on Ukraine, showing a blatant disregard for the peace negotiation process and sending the message that it was only interested in killing civilians, bombing infrastructure, and dealing as much damage as it possibly could, rather than easing its aggression and working towards a peaceful resolution. History appears to be repeating itself, but this time something is different, because it appears that President Trump, having been repeatedly lied to and double-crossed by Putin, has had enough of his Russian counterpart. While the two leaders have enjoyed a strong relationship in the past, it appears to be souring, and Trump has been outspoken in his criticism of the Kremlin leader at several points in 2025, condemning Russia's actions as disgusting and disgraceful in press conferences and social media posts, and even saying that Putin had gone absolutely crazy back in May after Russia launched a record aerial attack on Ukraine. Now, with Russia yet again saying one thing and doing another, and then having the audacity to bomb an American-owned factory, this may be the final straw, the tipping point that sends Trump over the edge, triggering a serious shift in his future dealings with Putin and his support for Ukraine. It remains to be seen exactly what will come of all of this, but this time, Russia may have pushed its luck a little too far. Now, you can learn more about how the war is spiraling out of control for the Kremlin in our recent video, detailing how Putin and the FSB are framing, firing, and even pushing some former generals and officials to suicide in a desperate power grab purge. Or check out Trump and NATO's plans to secure peace in Ukraine for years to come, once the war finally ends, with European troops on the ground and American air support in the skies. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our channel too, if you haven't already, so you can stay in the know about all of the latest news and developments from the front lines of Ukraine and beyond.